No further questions. Representative Linda Kushner, welcome back to the chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. Thank you for the, Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I'm here in support of 5127. In 1960, almost 60 years ago, when I was in college, I discovered that I was pregnant, and I knew that I was not ready or able to bring a child into this world. And I spoke with my partner, and he also was not ready or willing or able to do this. And I then spoke with my parents, who lived in Baltimore, and told them about the situation, and they agreed that I was making the right decision. But the big question was, this is 1960, how would I terminate the pregnancy safely? There was no such thing as a legal abortion in America, although there were in many other countries. And the question is, how would I do this? My uncle, who was a bachelor, so therefore everybody thought he knew everything about this, had heard that there was some sort of arrangement where you could be gotten through to a doctor who would perform this abortion. And the four of us, myself, my partner, and my parents, all thought this was important enough for us to go further into this. So we looked into it, and the arrangement was this. I went to Baltimore. My mother and I got in a car. We drove across the city to a Howard Johnson's parking lot, where it was arranged that we would have a Band-Aid on the front window, on the directional. Some of you are too young to know about the directional window. And we sat in that car, and someone would contact us. And after sitting there for about 15 minutes, a man came over, and he said to my mother, "I'll take your daughter." And I got out of the car, and I got into this man's car. And he started driving, and I can't remember whether the other young person was already in the car or whether we stopped to pick up this other young girl who was the same age as I was. And they drove until it got dark. And they kept driving around, and I had no idea where I was. And finally the car pulled up before what looked like a suburban house. And I went in, and this woman welcomed me, and I was given something that made me drowsy, and right before I lost consciousness, I saw a man in a white coat who I presumed was a doctor. And then about an hour later, or whatever the time was, I woke up, was told the abortion had been performed, and the other young woman and myself were put in the car, and we were driven around and around. And finally, this was like 3 hours from when I had left my mother, or when my mother had lost me, back to that Howard Johnson's, where my mother was still waiting, desperate with what had happened. What had she done with her daughter? Anyway, I got in the car, went home, felt fine. I was jubilant. I had survived. I no longer was pregnant. I called my boyfriend, and he was excited. My parents were excited, and I went to bed. It was like 9 or 10 o'clock by that time. In the middle of the night, at 4 o'clock, I woke up with these unbelievable pains in my stomach area, pelvic area, which got worse and worse. They were just cutting right through me. Now, my father was a doctor. He actually was a general practitioner who had done many, actually, in the end, he had delivered 3,000 children, so he knew all about obstetrics, and he knew immediately what had happened. I had I think it's called peritonitis, which is an infection that can come in immediately when an abortion has been performed in an unclean manner, and that disease could cause my death, or it could, if I survived, it could make me unable to have children in the future. And my father was desperate. You have to realize that it was absolutely illegal to do an abortion. But he said, I've got to deal with this. I'm going to give you shots. I think they got penicillin. They put it into me. That was pretty new, too, by that time. And the first shot didn't work. It was still hours later. The second shot seemed to work. Finally, the pain, I was running a temperature of 102, and I never run temperatures, and 99 is my highest. And he said, you know, if this doesn't bring it down, I'm taking her into the hospital no matter what happens to my practice, etc. Well, it did take it down, and I did recover, and I am happy to say that I did not die. And I'm also happy to say that I was able to, my boyfriend and I subsequently got married, and we had 2 wonderful daughters, and one of them has 2 wonderful children, so I have grandchildren. And I can say that I have never regretted that decision. But I can say that I've also been always angry. I think that's the only word, that my life was put in such terrible danger because some group of people thought that I should not be able to control my body. And so I began immediately working to find legal abortion. And of course, as you know, in 1973, Roe was decided, which was great. And then I continued to work. And when I was up here, I continued to work. In fact, we put a bill in like this to try and protect the right of a woman to decide whether or not to terminate her pregnancy. And I have decided to come forward after 60 years and tell you this story, which is deeply personal and still disturbing because I was so close to death. Because I want you to know what you're dealing with if we lose the protections of Roe v. Wade. We are dealing with the problem of young, not just young, any woman dying from an illegal abortion. And I don't want any woman to ever have to undergo what I went through. And I don't want any mother, or father for that matter, of any pregnant person to ever have to go through the anguish and anxiety and fear that my parents, particularly my mother, went through during that procedure. So that's why I'm here. I'm afraid that I do think that Roe v. Wade is under attack, has always been under attack, but I think it's in greater danger, and I think it's a responsibility of our legislature to protect Rhode Islanders from the things that happened to me and could happen to them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Just one comment. Thank you for coming. I know that was difficult, and I'm sure that I speak for the rest of the members of this panel that we're glad that you shared that story with us. And
thank you.
It does bring the issue of abortion to a human level.
Absolutely.
Especially with someone I've known for a long time.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.